how wet will it be next week? Well, this shows a summary of the rainfall totals each day through the next few days. Friday, a few spots on the map, otherwise largely white colours, so very little rain, a few spots of drizzle. But then you can start to see that change on Saturday. Ireland seeing some brighter colours there, a lot of blue across Ireland, rain starting to come in from the west, and then widespread rain across the UK on Sunday. Sunday's a wet day, more spotty in nature on Monday, much more showery in nature, but it's going to be a wet spell, essentially. If I play this forward, it starts off at Friday, like I say, a few spots of drizzle, but this will show the rolling rainfall totals through the next 5 to 6 days or so, and you can start to see it build up later Saturday. So that's when the rain bands begin to move in across parts of Ireland, into Northern Ireland, and then you can see it Saturday night into Sunday, these blues spreading east across the UK. But the brightest colours there, southern parts of Ireland, but also we're starting to see at this stage some brighter colours for Northern Ireland as well. And if I just zoom in here, you can see eastern parts of Northern Ireland, this zone here, darker blues, but also around the Mourne Mountains, some of the brighter colours. That indicates rainfall totals by later Sunday of 100 millimetres or slightly more here, and also more widely 20-30 millimetres across eastern parts of Northern Ireland. And that could cause a few issues, could cause some localised flooding and so on. So a yellow warning currently in force for Sunday for Northern Ireland, for the eastern side of Northern Ireland at least. You can see the Isle of Man also picking up some of those brighter colours. And you're starting to see these darker blues, even some brighter colours into parts of Wales, Scotland, southwest England. But note how they're more prevalent over higher parts and southwest facing hills as well, southeast facing hills across Scotland. And playing that forward into the start of next week, more and more of these darker blues and brighter colours appear. So fairly widely, 50 to 100 millimetres or so of rainfall accumulating through this period, particularly on Sunday and into Monday, across higher parts of western and southern UK in particular. Now, on Monday and into Tuesday, the rainfall becomes a little bit more sporadic. It's more showery. The main bands of rain are coming in on Sunday. But why is it western and southern parts of the UK affected? Well, that's because of the track of these lows. So, big change on the way from high pressure. That's what we've got at the moment. The high pressure has been sitting in the same place for a solid week or two. It's barely moved and it's stopped these lows from coming in. But in previous videos this week, we've talked about an ex-typhoon that's been pushing into the Pacific and really bashing the jet stream across the Pacific, and that ends up having a ripple effect all the way across North America into the Atlantic, finally giving the jet stream in the North Atlantic and these lows enough impetus to push high pressure away, and that really happens on Saturday night. It's been strongly signalled through the week that it was going to happen on Saturday night. Here's the fronts coming in. So Saturday's more of the same, but then on Saturday night, we've got these fronts moving in, spells of rain. But note how the jet stream, it's a bit more south shifted than we typically see in the UK. More typically, even in October, the jet stream sits somewhere between northwest Scotland and Iceland, but it's a bit more south shifted. So that's why it's southern and southwestern parts of the country where we'll see some decent spells of rain. Wet period on Sunday, and then that low, notice how slow moving it is. It's not zipping through. The jet stream doesn't have a straight line, and it doesn't have the kind of power that we've seen, for example, during previous unsettled spells this autumn. Storm Amy, that was a vicious feature, but it whooshed through quickly. This low takes its time. It almost gets detached from the jet stream, and then it essentially just sits there through Tuesday into Wednesday, and when that happens, it loses its initial fronts. The initial fronts bring in the wet weather on Sunday, and it just ends up being very showery. So, looking at the day-to-day detail, as I mentioned, Friday, more of the same, a lot of cloud cover. Saturday, very little difference. Largely cloudy, best of the brightness, northern Scotland, but we've starting to see the cloud thickening to the west as these fronts move in, and outbreaks of rain pushing into Northern Ireland by the end of the day, breeze picking up as well. But Sunday's looking like a washout, so yeah, unfortunately if you've got outdoor plans on Sunday, it is looking like a wet one, although it could brighten up into the west later on. And we do of course need the rain in places, especially towards the east. And then into Monday, Look at that, low pressure directly over us. A lot of these slow-moving, potentially thundery showers, blustery winds as well. Temperatures hovering around 13 to 15 degrees, but feeling on the cool side where we've got the blustery winds and those showers. Tuesday's another showery one. Wednesday, now this is where it gets a bit more uncertain, and this will basically dictate what the weather's like for the rest of next week. And I'll try and explain the uncertainties here. They do hinge on the location of the initial low, which, as you can see at the start of Wednesday, is still near the north of the UK. But there's another low that starts to appear as well, and there's this southward dig of the jet stream, and how this interacts with the initial low or with the subsequent low, that's uncertain. So there are two scenarios developing during Wednesday and into Thursday. One is that the jet stream digs far enough south to pick up the second low and send it in to the south of the UK. That would bring another very wet spell for the south of the UK. The other scenario is that it doesn't dig far enough south, and that low just fizzles away to the south of the UK. The first low just lingers through the week and it stays showery. So those are the two main sources of uncertainty that we're dealing with. And one way that we know that there's some of that uncertainty is by looking at some of the other computer simulations of the atmosphere. So what I showed you there was the Met Office simulation, but of course we've got we run the model lots of times at the Met Office, and the European model is run lots of times as well. This here shows the first low, lots of agreement on that, but by the time we get to Wednesday, more especially Wednesday night, this is what one run of the computer model from the Europeans is showing. Initial low up to the north of the UK, next low coming along, picked up by the jet stream, bringing another spell of rain into the south of the UK. We think that's the most likely scenario. But there are other scenarios, all showing slightly different positions of either the first low, for example, this scenario has the first low remaining dominant, next low, nowhere to be seen. And then if I just click on other scenarios, there's the first low into Scandinavia, there's the second low, again bringing a spell of rain. So those are the uncertainties that we're dealing with, and they can be summed up if we look at a different perspective. We go to today. Sometimes this takes a minute or so to load up, so bear with me. But this will show the trend for the pressure for the next 10 days, I believe. And there's a really clear signal. It's not just the trend from one computer model, it's the trend from 51. So what you can see is where you've got brighter oranges and reds, that's where all the runs are clustered together and showing the same thing. And in this case, we've got a point across southwest Scotland. You can click anywhere in the map. They're mostly saying the same thing for this pressure trend. Look how high the pressure is, and then everything agrees it's going to drop off, dipping to a nadir around Monday, Tuesday. That's the first low. Then a bit of a recovery, good agreement on that. But then we've got what we call big spread. So the bulk of the models have another low coming along, another dip around Thursday. Some have quite a significant dip, quite a deep low, but not many. Most of them take it back to where we started the week. And then this gentle rise, that's reasonable agreement for the following weekend, which of course is start of Halloween, start of half term and the week leading up to Halloween, of course. And what's interesting about that weekend is that there's likely to be a change in temperature as well. And this is a similar thing. It shows the temperature trend for the next 10 days. Of course, you've got the day-night ups and downs, and good agreement for the next few days. It gets a little bit milder actually as these Atlantic systems move in for the start of next week. Then it gets a bit fuzzy later next week. As you can see, it looks a bit chaotic Thursday, Friday, but a bit more agreement. And this is again, it's showing somewhere random in the Midlands, but if I run the pen along the map, you can see how that changes. They're all showing roughly the same thing, which is this downward trend. And you can more or less pick out the daytime temperatures here, high single figures, and the overnight temperatures a bit below zero. So the potential there for the first weekend of half term, the weekend after this, that the weather will turn colder. Why is that? It's because of a change in wind direction. So we talked about one low and then the potential for another low. Whatever happens, whatever uncertainties there are with that, they're likely to iron out, and that all those lows will move away, leaving behind, if I just turn on the temperature trend here, leaving behind a northerly airflow. What are we seeing here? We're seeing a 14-day outlook that shows the probability of different kinds of weather affecting the UK. The blues represent where we've got low pressure close to the UK, and we can click on any of these bars. And Friday, next Friday and Saturday, well, it's mostly taken up by this weather pattern. Really good agreement, which is actually fairly surprising for 8 days' time. After that small amount of uncertainty, end of next week, really good agreement for Saturday the 25th of October that this kind of weather pattern will prevail across the UK. Low pressure pushing into Norway, Sweden, whether it's that first low or the second low, it's moving away, leaving behind a north to northwesterly airflow. So it's going to feel colder. Still be some showers, particularly towards the northwest, but also some brighter weather. This is the kind of situation, if you're hoping for sunshine, you get plenty of it in this kind of situation. Clear skies at night, of course, touch of frost. I'm sure certain publications will go mad talking about walls of snow and so on, but in reality you get a few flakes of snow over the tops of the Scottish mountains and that's about it. But yeah, feeling colder start of that half-term week before eventually something a bit more westerly returns through that week.